Hello guys, thank you for joining me. My name is Kenton Park, and this is the series where we're going through the book of Proverbs. Today we're in the second half of Proverbs chapter 6. Let's jump into the text. Verses 20 through 35. My son, observe the commandments of your father, and do not forsake the teachings of your mother. Bind them continually around your heart, tie them around your neck. When you walk, they will guide you. When you sleep, they will watch over you. And when you wake, they will talk to you. For the commandment is a lamp, and the teaching is light, and reproof or discipline are the way of life. To keep you from the evil woman, from the smooth tongue of the adulteress, do not desire her beauty in your heart, nor let her capture you with her eyelids. For on account of a harlot one is reduced to a loaf of bread, and an adulteress hunts for a precious life. Can a man take fire into his bosom, and his clothes not be burned? Or can a man walk on hot coals, and his feet not be scorched? So is the one who goes into his neighbor's wife. Whoever touches her will not go unpunished. Men do not despise a thief if he steals to satisfy his hunger, but when he is found out, he must repay sevenfold. He must give all the substance of his house. The one who commits adultery with a woman is lacking sense. He who would destroy himself does it. Wounds and disgrace he will find, and his reproach will not be blotted out. For jealousy enrages a man, and he will not spare in the day of vengeance. He will not accept any ransom, nor will he be satisfied, though you give many gifts. Okay, so this passage really has two sections that really just blend nicely together. The first is talking about parental teachings. In ancient cultures, much more than today, the role of a parent was much more involved in the child's life. Nowadays, we have schools where children go off into a school, and there you've got teachers to teach them about life. But in the ancient world, it was a parent's job to teach their children about life. And the Jews of the Old Testament really particularly valued this. They are commanded throughout the entire Old Testament to teach their children, specifically in the passage that is most important to the Jews, called the Shema in Deuteronomy 6:4. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is your God, the Lord is one, and you shall love the Lord with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your might. These words I am commanding you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your sons. I love how this passage structures this, though. It talks in verse 20, the commandments of your father, and the teachings of your mother. This has both parents involved in teaching and raising a child, and though they are both giving instructions and teachings to their child, they approach it in a different way. A father, specifically in this time, a time of trade skills, a father would teach his sons the family trade, the family business, so that his son could then take over the business when his father is old. So the teachings of a father were much more practical in life, whereas the teachings of a mother, women are much more sociable and intuitive, so women can be great teachers of wisdom. This makes me think a lot of my parents. Now, my parents are kind of interesting because my dad is a bit more on the emotional side and my mom is very logical. So they kind of flip traditional roles in that. But they still also poured into me teachings and wisdom and insights growing up. And how my dad would often do it would be by giving me practical life examples and life experiences. And he would challenge me in ways that most Christian fathers have unfortunately not had the habit of doing. My dad kind of worked to drive what I might call dogma out of me. I wasn't taught just to believe the Bible just because the Bible says something. My dad would challenge me, well, Kenton, how do you know God is real? Kenton, how do you know that the Bible is true? How do you know that this is the Word of God? So my dad actually worked to instill not just knowledge, but thought and intellect into me. Whereas my mom, despite the fact that she's very logical and kind of seems more like that type, she is also much more geared towards wisdom. It's like when Star Wars Episode 2, when Obi-Wan goes to his friend Drax to ask about the dart that Jango Fett shot, and they're discussing why the droids weren't able to track it. And Drax is like, well, you Jedi should have more respect for the difference between knowledge and wisdom. There's a difference between the two. Many men, especially men like my father, really tend to focus on the knowledge, whereas women, specifically women like my mother, tend to be much more on the wisdom base. And that's kind of what this is approaching. Two different parents with two different approaches, instilling their child life lessons two different ways, both of them which have great value to them. But there's also a responsibility of the child. We can't just roll our eyes and ignore our parents' teachings. It tells us to bind them on our hearts and carry them on our necks, which is just poetic language of saying keep them always near you and close to you. It also, in that vein, in verse 22, offers a guidance from the wisdom and knowledge that you receive from your parents. When you walk about, when you sleep, when you wake up, the purpose is all day long these teachings are impacting your life. Now, section 2 of this is warning of 2 specific kinds of sexuality. The first one is the warning of harlotry. And I'm not being soft with that. I am meaning literal prostitution. For the most part in America, prostitution is not legal, but throughout most of world history, it has not only been legal, but it has been very common. In fact, in the ancient world, it may have been as common as pornography today. Probably one of the biggest differences, though, is that pornography you can get for free, whereas prostitution has a bit of a price to it. Now, this is not talking about the ethics of prostitution. The Bible definitely does address it many times, but this is addressing the wisdom of avoiding it oneself. And why? Well, because if you're paying an expensive price for a service, and especially if you're paying that price regularly, that's a depletion of your finances quite quickly. So even beyond the morality of the action, it is the wisdom of your financial responsibility to not waste so much money on it. If we turn over to the example of the prodigal son, one of the main ways that he squandered his finances was through prostitution. Now, any addiction does have a tendency to really weigh on our finances. People who are addicted to alcohol spend a lot of money just buying alcohol. People addicted to drugs spend a whole bunch of money buying drugs. And even more innocent addictions. Musical instruments aren't cheap. Video games, books, movies, everything has a cost to it. And whatever addiction or hobby you have, you need to be financially responsible with that. I could see, though, why this passage would really be specifically warning of harlotry, though, because I would think that the price of prostitution would be far higher than the price of like a cigarette or a drug. And sex does have an extremely strong addictive nature to it. So a person who's out buying prostitutes quite regularly, they're not going to be that wealthy. That's why it says in verse 26 that on account of a harlot, one is reduced to a loaf of bread. He's poor. All he has is a little bit of food to hold him over. The second warning of sexuality is specifically geared towards adultery. Now, I'm going to be specific on what the term adultery means. Adultery is sex with somebody where one or both of the parties is married to somebody else. So it's somebody going outside of their marriage union into another relationship. This is extremely damaging to the partner's emotions. When a person is betrayed by their spouse with sexual infidelity, it probably cuts deeper than almost anything else in the world. It is why in the last chapter, chapter 5, it was about relishing in your own marriage so that you're not tempted to go outside the marriage and cause harm on your own marriage. However, this is not focusing on protecting your marriage. It's focusing on protecting your neighbor's marriage, your brother's marriage, your friend's marriage. It says in 29, "So is the one who goes into his neighbor's wife. Whoever touches her will not go unpunished." This means if you're out committing adultery with somebody who is married to somebody else, then that person's spouse is not going to like you very much for it. The Bible talks quite regularly about the kind of trauma that this kind of broken trust in a marriage causes on the offended party member. Whenever it does talk about this, it often uses the term jealousy. I'm not sure if that term really fits our modern understanding, though. Jealousy, as we think of it, is often man, this person has something I wish I had. This kind of jealousy is kind of the opposite. It's, I've got this thing that this other person took away from me. So it's a jealousy of something that is rightfully yours, but it was abused by somebody else. Song of Solomon, chapter 8, verse 6 says, "Put me like a seal over your heart, like a seal on your arm, for love is as strong as death, jealousy as severe as Sheol. Its flashes are the flashes of fire, the very flame of the Lord." This is interesting poetry. Put me on a seal over your heart. This is a person saying to their spouse, value me, remember me, so that you're not tempted to go after other people. Kind of the same thing talked about in Proverbs 5. But why? For love is as strong as death, jealousy as severe as Sheol. This love, talking about the affection and the jealousy of an unfaithful partner, is that emotional stirring from your partner being unfaithful to you. The language it is as severe as death and Sheol. Now, Sheol was basically the Old Testament equivalent of hell. It is saying that dying is a better fate than having your spouse cheat on you. So too, this message is being recalled in Proverbs 6. For jealousy enrages a man, and he will not spare in the day of vengeance. He will not accept any ransom, nor will he be satisfied, though you give him many gifts. Now, what is this saying? Well, let's go back a little bit. In verse 30, men do not despise a thief if he steals to satisfy himself when he is hungry, but when he is found out, he must repay sevenfold. He must give all the substance of his house. So what this is saying is it's presenting two thoughts. On the one hand, if a man steals because he's hungry, well, that's an offense, and that offense needs to be paid back. But you know what? That's a tangible and weighable offense. You can measure how much to pay back somebody that you've stolen from. In the biblical system was you repay sevenfold for whatever you stole. If you stole somebody's dollar, you pay them back $7. And this is to rebuild restitution, restore the relationship. What can restore a person, though? And not just any person, but a beloved spouse. And that's what this is saying. When you've broken somebody's trust and gone with their spouse in defiling their marriage, there is no ransom for that. There is no way to pay that back. There is no price you can put on the damage that you caused that time. And that's why it's saying, nor will he be satisfied though you give him many gifts. Once you destroyed somebody's marriage through breaking the fidelity of their spouse, there is just no paying that back. It doesn't matter what material things you try to offer them in payment. The damage was not materialistic, so it cannot be paid back with materialistic things. Now, what I love about this passage is it's not just teaching us dogma, don't have sex because bad. It's teaching why to do certain things. It's targeting two specifically dangerous forms of sex. Sex with a prostitute, which is expensive and morally shaky at best, and sex with somebody else's spouse, which damages that person's marriage. This isn't rooted in, don't do this because I said so. This gives reasons, very good reasons, of why you should avoid this kind of behavior. Anyway, guys, thank you for watching. God bless.